many firms that are multidisciplinary, but the big difference is the integration. So an integrated team is really interdisciplinary. And that means that the knowledge and methods that each of the different disciplines bring to the table are actually synthesized and put to work together. So let's reframe this as how to work in an interdisciplinary team. So we're going to talk about the roles that interior designers, architects, and engineers play on a project. And we're going to discuss where those skills overlap and how and when it makes sense for those different disciplines to come to the table and take part in the process. And so we intend to leave time at the end for questions, but please feel free to interrupt us, whether that's with your voices, which we totally welcome, or in the chat with any questions you might have at the moment. So I will start by introducing myself. I'm going to age myself quickly. I'm a 1994 grad of the interior design program. As Chan mentioned, I'm a principal and the high ed sector interior design leader for DLR Group. I've spent about the past 18 years focusing on high ed projects, and I love it because I get to spend time on college campuses across the nation. So in some ways, I feel like maybe I never graduated. And I joined DLR Group on day one of the work from home order due to this lovely pandemic. So 2020 wasn't great, but it was great for me because I got to join these awesome people that are going to introduce themselves next. So Ian.
My name is Ian Kilpatrick. I am a 2014 grad from the College of Architecture. Started at DLR Group right after school and really kind of fell into our K through 12 practice. I live and breathe schools very much like Gretchen does, just a little bit earlier grade levels. And the interesting thing that DLR Group really let me embrace was my notion of designing from the inside out. So I played interiors for a long time here prior to beginning to launch into leading some of our architectural work on the K through 12 side of things, and now help lead our Kansas City office on the entire design front. So happy to be here today.
Thank you all for having me as well. I am Jonathan Draheim. I am a 2009 graduate of Kansas State. I received my undergrad and my graduate degrees in architectural engineering. So I'm one of those crazies from over in Seton Hall. I'm sure you know a few of those. I have known DLR Group for around 15 years now. I was a mechanical engineering intern for 4 summers when I was a college student in Manhattan. And I have been full-time with them since February 2011. I've known them a long time, and what I do for them as a mechanical engineer, and I'll go into this in more detail in a little bit. I work within the integrated design teams to make building designs function and comfortable. And something else that I also work with a lot is our high performance designers that collaborate with our architects and all of our engineers to be sure that we are designing our system serving these buildings to be as efficient and optimal for energy use as possible within certain project parameters. It's an honor to work in this family. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. And if there are any Kansas State marching band kids on here, I am a former drum major, so you're getting an A+ in this class.
Yeah, I was going to say Jonathan's maybe one of the biggest K-State fans that I know. Okay, so we're going to quickly kind of touch on what the definition of an interior designer, an architect, and an engineer is. And really, when I look at this, I mean, as an interior designer, you can be a commercial designer, you can be a residential designer, you can go into furniture and sales for manufacturers, you can go into storefront design and theater design. There's a really, really wide range of opportunities. But I think the piece of this definition that to me is really critical is that last part of the last sentence, which is while considering the complex physical, mental, and emotional needs of people. Our tagline is, it focuses on the human experience and elevating the human experience through design. And I think to me, that's a big difference between the interior design program at K-State and the interior architecture and product design program at K-State is I really do feel like the interior design program really comes at it from a human-centered focus. And that's what I really loved about my school and what I love about what I do every day.
So architecture is such a big realm to kind of cover. As I mentioned earlier, my track was very different. And I think every architect's track looks a little bit different. At the end of the day, you're coming out and working toward the design and construction of either new or additions and renovations to existing buildings. That's kind of that all-encompassing notion of what an architect does. But when you come out of school, you can become a whole slew of different things, whether it's a design leader, which is very much what I do on our projects now, a project manager where you're kind of overseeing the processes and coordination of the project, a project architect where you're really leading the drawing and detailing of our buildings. There are a lot of kind of caveats as an architect that you can begin to fall into. And as Gretchen had said, and I echo this, it is all about elevating the human experience through design. And I think the richness of today's conversation is that overlap between where architects can begin to work with interiors and all of our other disciplines, whether it's structural, mechanical, you name it, to sculpt space, because we are creating environments to be in. And while we love a beautiful building, think about where we spend a lot of our time.
Wonderful. I just want to say this is a tremendous and very thorough definition of engineering that Gretchen happened to find for us, but the one that I will definitely throw out there, engineering is so broad, this is how I would classify it. It's using math and science theory to solve real world problems. That is the overall concept of what engineers do. Now, as I'm sure you've heard with multiple majors throughout Kansas State, like mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, civil engineers, what have you, what we do specifically at DLR Group, which is another major at Kansas State, like I mentioned, is architectural engineering. So what does this mean? Basically, it makes building designs stable. It makes building designs functional. What do I mean by those? Stability. The structural side of architectural engineering, it designs the building structure so the building stands up. You want a safe and stable building for your occupants. That's really the why behind that piece of the puzzle. Functional, I'm talking about mechanical systems, electrical systems, and plumbing systems within the building. So mechanical, we want to be sure that the building is heated and cooled appropriately. We want to design plumbing systems to be sure that we have adequate plumbing for the building occupants. And as far as the power side of this, we want to be sure that we have a building that's illuminated to the proper level, and that all these mechanical and electrical systems work together along with the architecture and the interior design to complement the functionality of the space and not impede it. So that is, in a nutshell, what being an architectural engineer is all about.
There we go.
There we go. No, it's okay. It's technology at the end of the day. I experienced that too. One of the wonderful things about DLR Group is we do practice integrated design. Now, taking a big step back, there are multiple different ways of delivering projects in the design and construction industry. Traditional models will have a client or an owner say, I need a building design. They'll send out an RFQ, an RFP, and then they will eventually select an architect. So architects will then typically hire engineers, or if you're in a full service design firm like DLR Group, you might have architects and engineers all at one spot. So then once the project is designed, then it will go to a contractor to price it. And as you can probably see, those projects have gotten built. That has been a traditional model for a while, but there's a possibility for some communication breakdowns along that project path. What we do at DLR Group to practice this integrated design is we have all the people involved with the building design, all the people that are associated with the ownership of that building, and all the people that are associated with the construction of that building at the table from the very, very beginning all the way through when the construction is complete. So what that enables us to do is it builds in some checks and balances of what the owner wants in their building, what they want as far as their design. How can we design their building to meet their goals and make it functional? And also, can we do it within their budget? Because the more materials and the more bells and whistles you put into a building, your price goes up. So there's a balance between construction, design, and owner input that starts all the way from the initial design scope and it goes all the way through the construction of the project. And it's not just as far as within the design, the architects, engineers, and the interiors. We also will get input from a lot of our other dedicated services, such as energy. Like I mentioned, looking at our systems within our project parameters, multiple different HVAC systems carry a different energy consumption. So we have a high performance design group that assists us with recommending our system types. We have campus master planning if the project scope is appropriate to have those services. If we have a special cultural performing arts project like a theater or music hall, we will bring in our innovative technology design group to say what kind of specialties are incorporated in spaces like that, or if we have to be concerned about acoustics for any reason whatsoever, or if we have a lab. So you can see how many different players get to play along this project timeline. And if you do it in an integrated fashion, the result is amazing.
Yeah, I will say that I'm getting the opportunity to work on a couple of what we call high ed and culture and performing arts mashups, where they're academic performance buildings on campuses. And so getting to hear from our ITDG group is amazing, and understanding the acoustics of a space, especially a performance space, and some of the nerdy graphs and charts that they develop to share how a space is going to perform and how lively and and or quiet it can be is really quite fascinating. It's a new experience for me. So all these years after graduation, I'm still learning. So, one thing we did want to talk about a little bit, we've all kind of given a little brief history on, what our different disciplines do. And, as Jonathan mentioned, we work with all of these other disciplines as well, but we wanted to really kind of focus on architecture, interiors, and engineering, and understand where those overlaps occur between the different disciplines. And what's interesting to me, we probably have some things under engineering that overlap between interiors and engineering. And I'm going to say, really it's light fixtures. And I think we have it kind of in the middle, but there's an overlap between light fixture selection. So a lot of times we'll allow the engineers to design some of the spaces that are a little bit more traditional or common, but some of the special, public spaces, we may want to have more control over, what the specialty lighting is in those places. Obviously, coordination with power and data when it comes to furniture placement and those sorts of things are definitely things that, should really be in that little chunk between engineering and interiors. When it comes to architecture and interiors, clearly there's an overlap with programming and adjacencies and stacking and blocking and space planning. There are thankfully quite a few architects out there that are like Ian and really are holistic thinkers and really look at the building from the inside out and understand the importance of that piece. And then between engineering and architecture, obviously, you're going to have the civil engineers involved in the site plan. You're going to have, structural engineers involved with the exterior material selection, because it's going to have an impact on the structure of the building. And then, again, energy calculations and those sorts of things. And where we have things that are traditionally done, interiors, traditionally, we are in charge of interior material and finish selection, and we're brought to the table definitely for furniture selection and specification. And then, architecture, again, you can see that, they quite often are sometimes solely responsible for site plans, waterproofing details, window schedules, all those really exciting things. And then engineering, there's, heating and cooling demands and design of that, power sizing, mechanical, system sizing, structural loads, all those fun things that probably require more math than what I've ever had to do. But it's really this piece in the middle where things overlap, and that's where we really bring everybody to the table. And it's not just the architects, the engineers, and the interiors. Like Jonathan mentioned, it's the client, it's the contractor, it's other specialty disciplines that are necessary on the project. And quite often, if you bring the right people to the table at the right time, early and often, you can make those really critical decisions up front and have a lot more time to spend on design and less time reworking, because you've really solidified some of those super important things. We have all sorts of graphs that we could have shown that demonstrate this, but we wanted to try to keep the presentation, short and sweet, so we have time to have dialogue at the end of this. Do you guys want to add a little bit to that?
I think the interesting thing, we were as a team kind of collectively looking at the slide deck, and Gretchen had brought up this slide, and I said, the thing I really like about this is when interiors, engineers, and architects all get out of their lane. So, I mean, very recently on a project, I had a phenomenal interior designer who decided she wanted to take a stab at the exterior elevations of this adaptive reuse we were doing. And when you drive up to the building, it has such a presence and vibrancy because of what she did that translates into the interior environments. And those are those kind of moments when you veer out of your lane, your traditional lane, and say, hey, I'm going to take, a stab at something an architect might normally own, that I think bring the most richness to projects. So if anything from this diagram to take home is, just because it's in your circle doesn't mean somebody else couldn't jump in there with you, or that you could jump out of yours.
Ian and Gretchen, those are wonderful points. I would say the one thing that I would definitely emphasize about integrated design is it's an extremely collaborative process. And the other thing it encourages is active listening. I think I'm a more well-rounded professional because we practice this type of project delivery. And I feel like I might have a better understanding of what my architectural colleagues or my interior architecture colleagues would look for out of their designs and why they're pushing certain issues forward compared to someone that would just work at a straight engineering firm. So I think not only does it make me a more rounded professional, but I think it helps us all work for each other, looking at the big picture.
Yeah, it's nice when you can be in the office and you see a group of people, which clearly we haven't been doing a lot of this lately, but when you see a group of people shredding, or having a project team, conversation, and if you didn't know who they were, you maybe wouldn't know which discipline they're from. So the blurring of the lines and our ability to speak to each other's, expertise is always very refreshing.
So the design process, this is the design process, right? Like if you think in your mind when you start a project and kind of get to the end, this is probably what it looks like, or at least it's what it always feels like for me. As at DLR Group, we have a big conversation around kind of the dynamics of teams, and teams really start by forming. You're consistently forming new teams of people. I can't think of a single project where the same exact team of members move to the next one. You're always going to be adding in new dynamics. And that's that kind of forming stage. There will be a storming phase of the project, an inherent part of the project where you're trying out different solutions, you're researching prototypes, you're having those critical conversations where, you kind of begin to rub, and maybe sometimes the wrong way, but those are those instances of design collaboration that can be really rich, or if you don't have them, really detrimental to the project. Past that storming phase, you get to the norming. You're starting to get a jive. You can really start to flush this thing out. Everybody's on the same page and they kind of know how to anticipate one another, and then really into performing so that you're able to articulate what the design intent is, document it effectively, and get the job out to be built. And every project does this. Sometimes some stages are a little less so than others. Sometimes the storming phase might be more severe than it is on another, but I think, and Gretchen and Jonathan, please chime in, that it's always kind of a way to look at a project process and know what to expect of each time you're starting a new project.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it. I think it's this next slide that starts to talk about, in that process, when are things occurring during that process. So, if we had the Venn diagram up next to this as well, in the concept design where you're thinking about the side of the building, the massing of the building, going through the programming, setting sustainability goals. Honestly, quite often we will estimate the cost of a project at concept design to understand kind of, the magnitude of, where are we right now? And really at this concept design stage, every one of those disciplines that we had on that slide is probably going to be here. You're going to have landscape architects, you're going to have the engineers, maybe the electrical engineers, maybe, maybe systems design, but definitely structural, definitely civil. You know, you're going to have the client involved in this. You're going to be doing the programming and the visioning and really setting, this is that big picture piece of it. And then as we go through the process, it's still those same major disciplines are here throughout the entire phase. And it's really not until kind of construction documents where we're literally documenting all of the decisions that have been made to that point where it starts to become, the team might start to get a little bit smaller, but they never go away. They're always brought back if something comes in over budget, and there has to be kind of a value engineering process that goes on. That design team is going to be brought right back to make sure that those original goals are seen through to the end.
Concept design, from my perspective, I'm a big believer that concept design is when everybody has a seat at the table. Because for Jonathan to come in and say, hey, my mechanical equipment needs 4,000 square feet of space throughout this campus, that could be a huge make or break to your planning efforts, your budgets, those are those kind of roadblocks that we don't want to run into later. And anytime you're trying to throw an additional team member in somewhere along when we start to normalize is detrimental to that person's ability to contribute meaningfully. And if Gretchen's not on at the beginning to help with that concept design, with the programming, with those interior adjacencies, crafting and sculpting the spaces, that isn't going to happen down the road when the building's kind of set and formed. And it's a trust thing. It's, as she mentioned, you have the owner sitting at the table with you. That's an opportunity to build trust with them, to be able to really get them to believe in this team, trust this team, and use this team as a sounding board.
All right. Next. So I think critical to all of this is this notion of no one knows as much as everyone, or collective intelligence. And really that's the key here. I think I had a project really early on in my career that really solidified for me the importance of integrated design. And it was a competition. Yes, we still do competitions in the real world. So we do professional competitions. And our team got together. It was, and the piece that was missing was the client. But we got together as our design and construction team, and we spent 2 full days. We spent a Friday and a Saturday together in a room, talking about what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and we literally answered all of the big questions we needed to answer to show up at the interview, basically with a schematic design for the project. So we knew what the structural system was going to be. We knew what the mass of the building was going to be. We knew what all the mechanical and electrical systems were going to be. We knew what the program was. We knew all the stacking, blocking, adjacencies, you name it, we had it nailed. And the fact that we answered all of those really critical questions and collectively as a team made those decisions together in less than 48 hours was really impactful. And we don't always have the opportunity to do that on projects, but that was, I'm going to say, how far into my career was I? Maybe 8 to 10 years into my career. And so that to me was wow, this is really how it should be done. And thankfully, the firms I've worked for in my career have practiced that way. But that notion of collective intelligence, I think, is really important. And we're going to go into a little case study that Ian and Jonathan have worked on together and share how that actually gets put to work.
Perfect. So this past year at DLR Group has been a really interesting one. We have been spearheading basically the rebuilding of the U.S. Virgin Islands Department of Education schools following Hurricanes Maria and Irma. And that's on the 3 islands of St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John. And I can't even remember how many hundreds of thousands of square feet of space. But I went back into our database, and there are over 150 DLR Group employees who have touched these projects. So when Gretchen, Jonathan, and I say it literally takes a village to do these, it's no joke. We'll go on to the next one. Charlotte Amalie High School is a rebuild on basically the side of a mountain. And while it is the new campus will be a beautiful structure architecturally, it was an interiors challenge through and through. That's kind of what this diagram is showing, trying to figure out how all of the spaces, how the learning communities wanted to connect to some of the career and technical education, and all of those functions work together when you have about a 3-story grade change from top to bottom. Where are we connecting? How are these adjacencies forming? We can go to the next one. And then how is the whole campus, approached with this sort of notion of a carnival celebration? So not only is the architecture and the planning of the site about this carnival, this kind of celebration and corridor down the center of it, but it also begins to kind of trickle into the buildings as we begin to pull out themes of the islands, of some of the narrow courtyard passages and the port city of Charlotte Amalie, the beaches that everybody is very familiar with and are absolutely stunning, and the sea and just the feelings that come with those. And so as we start to identify not only the functions of spaces, the types of spaces, the adjacencies of spaces, you're layering in this notion of concept too throughout the campus, to make it a really, really rich project.
No, definitely. I would say one of the big interesting things about that, looking at that elevation where you had the 3 buildings going down the side of the mountain. Oh, that's perfect, Gretchen. Thank you. Like Ian said, you definitely want to hammer the concept down. What made this a really great design opportunity engineering wise was if you're carving into the side of the mountain, commonly you don't have favorable soil conditions for running a lot of utilities underground, or you can do it, but it's just going to be a very heavy capital expense to do that. So we were thinking, okay, how in the world do we bring our water and our cooling water to every one of these buildings and also keep the design concept and still look nice? So what we have design-wise, routing from building to building, we have a lot of overhead utilities underneath covered walkways routed from building to building. That way we're not hindering on the architecture or any of these space functions. And the other question we had to think of was, all right, we have this dedicated floor space for class programs in all these buildings, but we do need to condition these spaces because I'm sure you would all imagine the Virgin Islands gets a little hot and a little humid. So what we decided to do, all these buildings have mezzanine spaces where we have our HVAC air handlers, and cooling is done by connecting piping circuits from a main cooling plant like what you have at K-State to each of these air handlers, and that delivers the cooling air down to each floor, which is all hidden and concealed. So design-wise, I feel like it is a perfect merge of keeping the architectural concepts at the forefront, the system being the offensive line and moving everything forward and being unnoticed. So it's a perfect system, the one that doesn't get noticed, but it functions.
What Jonathan didn't mention, and you can keep going, Gretchen, yeah, is that kind of counterintuitive to how we operate here in the States, where everything's air conditioned and everything's heated. Not every space in these buildings are. A lot of them are what we call semi-conditioned, so they're naturally ventilated in order for these campuses to reach a net zero goal. So they'll be off the grid at some point in their life, maybe not immediately when they open, but they're ready to be. And there is so much science and high performance design that has to go into making sure these spaces are ventilated, that they're comfortable 98, 99% of the year. And that even layers into your material selections. Because of the salt in the air, because of the humidity, you can't pick a lot of materials that you would in the States because it's give them 2 years and they'll rust. And so it's really been a rich collaboration to try and figure out how to orchestrate these buildings.
Yeah, for whatever reason, you don't need heat in the Virgin Islands. It's crazy. Not really common here in the Midwest.
Another project in the Virgin Islands that highlights a little more of that kind of semi-conditioned indoor-outdoor connection is pre-K 8 on the island of St. Croix that will be a rebuild. And this image is a great example of how indoor and outdoor space begin to blend between an outdoor amphitheater that might have a shade canopy with solar panels into a band orchestra space that could perform as a stage for the amphitheater, and then subsequently into the commons beyond. So it kind of has that dual-sided notion.
A great systems design opportunity there, because if you have a enclosed space that is conditioned, and say you're blowing really cold air in there, and then you're outside, you have warm, moist air. And I'm sure you all have been on a beach, or if you haven't, you've probably taken at least a cold Diet Coke can outside at one point in your life. And if it's a really hot, humid day, what happens? It sweats. Well, the thing is, science, and a building operates the exact same way. So like Ian was alluding to earlier, with collaboration with high performance design and architecture, we really do have to pay attention to the surfaces of each of these rooms, and also where we're transitioning from inside to outside, and how the systems operate that are on the inside, so we don't have condensation and mold and mildew forming on the interior surfaces, which causes a health hazard. So definitely when you have these transitional spaces from inside to outside, it presents a lot of unique opportunities that we don't run into too often, but glad we got to do that on this project.
I think the thing I love most about this project is that, I mean, campus designs are very common in the USVI because it's gorgeous all the time. But what we really ended up doing was this campus layout and the kind of adjacencies and the thoroughfare through, which we've coined the tapestry walk. That was really developed with interiors and our landscape architect kind of talking about how we wanted these adjacencies to happen, what grade levels wanted to be near each other, you know, where does the common central hub kind of want to be. It ended up being a space planning effort in a landscape kind of way, which I think is a really intriguing and sort of different lens to look at how again, you can step outside of your traditional role and really begin to impact a project holistically in a positive way. A little more to Jonathan's point, and I'll let him chime in after this, but there is a kind of procession into these buildings that had to be developed from an interiors notion. You know, how you enter a building in the Virgin Islands is a vernacular of the architecture. You always come into these deep covered porches. The experience of deep shade is very much an emotional response almost for people in the VI. Coming into ventilated space, so that's not air conditioned space, it is just vented through the roofs. In the case of Arthur Richards, through these oculists that are in each of the kind of collaboration zones, and then furthermore into some of the classroom environments, which are fully air conditioned.
No, definitely. That concept was repeated on every building in Arthur Richards, minus the administration office building, which is similar to what you'd see at a school building here. But really, with all these designs at Arthur Richards, we had conditioned spaces around the building perimeter, because so where most of the occupants would be for majority of the time. And in the center where the oculi were, we were actively, or passively, I should say, relieving that conditioned air out the top of the building. So there's not any active conditioning in the center of these buildings. So it's passive. So it's just air flowing or just ventilation. So that is just something that we had to consider on the design side, but I think it does work well with the connection that Ian mentioned. You don't really see a lot of semi-conditioned space here just due to the climate. Hot and humid isn't really friendly to a semi-conditioned space. But the funny thing is that I'm just going to get engineering jock on you for about 2 seconds. Common set point here would probably be somewhere 72, 75, what you'd set in your apartment or your sorority house, fraternity house, whatever. Set point for those folks in the Virgin Islands is 78 to 84. So they are used to a much warmer climate than what they are here. So they can tolerate a little bit warmer temperature and humidity. So different strokes for different folks. So it's just hard to get our heads around. It's like, they want it hot. I'm like, yeah, they really don't want heat. So anyway, all right, back to the program.
So I cannot nerd out like Jonathan can, so I will leave it all to him. But what the collaboration on this one really yielded was a great, beautiful, stunning space. So we're able to really articulate the vernacular of these hip roofs. We cut an oculus in it. It did dual purpose for daylighting and ventilation through material choices, biophilic themes that are aligned with the colors on the exterior of the buildings and also the interior buildings. This campus has a very holistic feel. It's very complete inside and out. And that was largely in part due to the fact that we all sat down at a table at the very beginning and said, what's this thing going to look like? What's it going to be? And so I think these two in particular are great to showcase the interdisciplinary approach to projects.
Yeah. And Jonathan, I will say that I worked on a project in Atlanta, Georgia that had, some transition space that was unconditioned. So it was a screened-in porch on a library on the
Mhm.
north side, and so it was interesting that they wanted to, so it was going to be in shade most of the time, but you could be in the library and then go onto the screen porch, and it had fans, ceiling fans out there. But it was interesting that in Hotlanta they wanted to give it a whirl, and so far so good. So
Nice.
yeah. Yeah, I think that the thing that was interesting to me was this particular image reminded me when Ian and Jonathan and I were chatting about this presentation, and I was talking about, when I was in school, I'm not sure I would have realized that the way a floor plan was organized from enclosed space and open space, how much of an effect that it has, positive or negative, on the performance of a building, and that the importance of making sure that the engineers can have input on the stacking and blocking of a building, to be able to say, if you could make this shift, then the building will perform this much better, or those sorts of things. And so again, it's been something I've really enjoyed about the profession, is that every project is slightly different. And like I said, still having the opportunity to learn even after, I'll let you guys do the math, all the years that I've been out of school. So I think with that, we're down to questions. This is hospitality. So, our hospitality group gets to do some really, really fun projects. But I'm going to stop sharing so we can see faces. I don't know if things were going on in the chat, because I can't see that when I'm.
We've got a couple.
We've got a couple questions already, friends.
Awesome. Let's hear it.
What is the biggest challenge for working in an interdisciplinary team? Ooh.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, there can be times when, personalities don't mesh well. I'm sure that you guys have worked on, joint projects or team projects in school, and maybe there were some personality issues, or how do you come to an agreement on how something is going to move forward, and who has what role. But really, that's it's very few and far between. I think again, you kind of have to embrace it, and it's such a learning opportunity that I feel like the benefits far outweigh any of the negatives. But I have been on projects before where the team dynamic is not as healthy as it could be. And sometimes, you can work through that as a team. And sometimes you just have to think to yourself, thank goodness this isn't a 10-year long project.
Yeah.
So, it does happen in the real world. In your professional career, you will have times where you're working with colleagues, or with a client, or with a contractor, or some other consultant that maybe, in-house or out of house, that there's just some personality conflicts. And you just have to, all be adult about it, and figure out how to work at it. So.
No, absolutely. Stemming off of that, I think that is a great point. And I think sometimes, in my experience, Ian, I don't know if you can speak to this or not. I think sometimes when everybody's a little bit worn down, it's real easy to get into their own set of weeds, like for mechanical systems design, or, just doing the heating and cooling calcs, or scheduling equipment, and not keeping your eyes on the big picture. When everybody has energy, it's real easy to focus on the big picture, and everybody's personality is at their best. When everybody gets a little bit worn down, like Gretchen's alluding to, sometimes the tough sides of the personalities come out, and there's some miscommunications that might happen. But the focus, I would say, just to if you keep everything on the big picture, I think things tend to go well as far as the project communication, and also the project design and production. But that would probably be the biggest challenge that I've seen, in addition to what Gretchen already mentioned.
Yep, I agree on both fronts. You guys nailed it.
Very good. All right, so who's next here? We got, all right, from Hannah. How do you determine concept inspiration in real world projects? In school, it almost feels like it's more aesthetic based and abstract that we draw from our own understanding of hypothetical needs.
I mean, I would say that that's something that I think DLR Group does exceptionally well. is really, especially it's understanding place. And so in my past life, I did a lot of work on State Department buildings overseas. And so we would really dive into, what is the culture of Windhoek, Namibia? What is the culture of Recife, Brazil? And so, on the Virgin Islands project, they had to really dive into and research what that place is about, and then be able to connect that research to a story that relates to the project. And so I'll let Ian touch on that, but I think that I'm constantly amazed at the work that is done by people and how creative they can be when really thinking about, there's something about the project, whether it was in the brief or something the client said, or the place that the project is in, that's what provides the inspiration.
Absolutely. I think that's what school teaches you really well. So harness that and don't ever lose it, because you're just going to use it again in the real world. But the VI was very much studying the vernacular. We did an in-depth study of what Virgin Islands architecture vernacular looks like. And Arthur Richards, for example, was very much inspired by the place. There was an educator who had referenced James Turrell and his sort of skylight forms, and his ability to, sit in those spaces and witness the sky, witness where you are. That brought light to the Oculus. I mean, that's ultimately what began to inform not only the organization of our buildings, but the forms of the buildings, and then layering into the sort of notion of a tapestry and how we're beginning to weave together different cultures, different races, different people into this one community of pre-K through 8 learners. And so you draw from a lot of the same things you do in school, and you apply them. But to Gretchen's point, it is always about the place and who you're designing for, or should be.
And you will also run across those clients that don't care. Continue to go through the process so it makes sense for you, whether they want to hear that story or not. Design has to make sense for you. And there will be some of those clients that are just like, I just want to see what you've produced for me. So know that that's there, but don't let that kill your spirit. To Ian's point, harvest the creativity and your process and how you approach design, and share that with your colleagues when you have your first job. I mean, you may say, this is kind of how I like to start a project, or do it and then say, hey guys, this is what I've been working on. Definitely don't give that up.
I definitely think it is all about. Go ahead, Ian. Sorry, go for it.
I was going to say we have time for one more, but go ahead, Jonathan.
No, I was going to say it definitely is all about passion. And I would say, as far as inspiration, I am more geared towards the system side rather than the actual building design. But what I always like to think is, what can I do just a little bit better this time than I did last time? Is there a lesson that I learned on the last project that I can apply to this project and make this design just a little bit better? Can I make my system look a little more aesthetically pleasing? Can I design it a little bit so it would function a little bit better? Can I make it more energy efficient? Could I recommend a new system that would enhance the architecture? Just numerous questions that I consistently ask myself. So just a broader concept, what can I do this time that makes it just a little bit better?
And with that, are there any specific topics to learn about or classes we can take as students to enhance our ability to work and communicate with other disciplines? Ooh.
Well, so I will just tell you, the one thing that I wish people would have told me when I was still in school is there's a lot of writing that goes into this career. So writing to share about the project, marketing collateral, writing if it's going to be published, writing to use the project as another, to pursue additional work. It's not something that I love to do, is write, but that was a big shocker to me. So if you can take creative writing classes, or you like to write, any of those kinds of things, I think would be, that's one thing I wish I knew when I was still in school.
Yep, spot on. That was my answer too, actually.
I think it's great you guys mentioned that. And what's interesting is in engineering, they actually teach us technical writing, But, you know, for selling things, then they say, okay, yeah, write it a little bit differently, like what you did before that. But anywho, so I like to think I know a couple of methods of writing, and I'm sure I'm going to learn some more. But that is a really important skill to have. But I would say that's under the general umbrella of just communication. And class or not, I think the best advice I've ever received, and something that I'd love to share with you, is just understand who you're talking to and understand what they want. If you understand that and you can go in there with that type of mindset, I think you're going to have a leg up on anybody you're sitting at the table next to. And as far as specific classes, I took undergrad and graduate courses in engineering. I think my most beneficial class in college was how to influence friends and learn how to work with people. I think it was a business management class. I feel bad I don't even remember the title of the class, but it was a business management class and how to manage others. It was very, very beneficial because we learned about different personalities and how different people are after different things in a certain profession. Extremely beneficial. And that, and no baloney here. Everything I learned in K-State marching band, I don't use I don't conduct every day except when I'm getting ready in the morning. But as far as working with people, how I influence and how I motivate, all those activities that you guys get to be involved in and that you get to have an influence on, I use those skills every day. So don't ever take a chance on, you know, your network or burning any bridges. If anything, just build some more and grow your network as much as you can. You never know when you'll be able to help somebody out.
Awesome.
With that,
That's great.
Anna, what do you play?
I was literally about to ask you that. I play piccolo.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Cool
I got
deal.
you.
Well, okay. Tell Frank I say hi. I was a saxophone player, and then I played so darn bad. He said, "Take a stick. I don't want to hear you play anymore." So that's what he let me do the last 3 years.
Excellent. Well, this is great.
Okay.
yeah, thank
This
you
is
so much, guys.
absolutely valuable time to get some information from the real world practice. Okay. So thank you for your time. And then it was a very outstanding conversation with your experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Go Cats.
Yeah. And then, yeah. And then we have another one more event after this. So be prepared to attending town hall meeting after this at 3 p.m. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you again.
Take care,
Bye.
y'all.